For the past 3 decades, seniors across the Western world have been handed the same advice. Cut back on full-fat dairy. Too much saturated fat. Too much sodium. Too risky for aging hearts and aging bodies. And so millions of adults over 65 dutifully reduced, or entirely eliminated, one of the most protein-dense, muscle-protective foods that nature produces. The research, it turns out, tells a very different story. A large-scale nutritional analysis involving over 3,500 adults aged 60 and older, published in a leading European journal of aging research, found that regular full-fat dairy consumers, including those who ate cheese daily, had significantly greater muscle mass retention, stronger grip strength, and markedly lower rates of sarcopenia than those who had cut it out. Not slightly better results. Measurably, consistently better across every marker of muscle health that researchers tracked. Today, we are counting down the 5 specific cheeses that research now links most directly to muscle protection after 65. We have ranked them from compelling to extraordinary. And the #1 cheese on this list is something most seniors already have sitting in their refrigerator, being used entirely the wrong way. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why certain proteins in cheese behave differently in the aging body, which compounds in aged cheeses protect muscle and bone simultaneously through a mechanism most doctors rarely discuss, and the precise daily amounts that research associates with real, measurable improvement in strength and lean mass over just 90 days. So we will also walk through the story of a 71-year-old retired teacher who had been losing muscle mass for 3 years, despite staying physically active, until one straightforward dietary change reversed that trajectory within 8 months. Stay with us through #1. The science behind it has already changed the way sports nutritionists approach senior muscle health, and it may change how you think about one very specific time of day. Right now, before we go any further, drop a comment and tell us, are you currently eating cheese, and has a doctor or nutritionist ever suggested you cut back? We read every single comment on this channel. The answers are often surprising, because a great deal of what seniors have been told about full-fat dairy simply does not match what the current research shows. So #5, ricotta. The fast-acting muscle trigger most seniors overlook. Most people think of ricotta as a cooking ingredient, something layered into baked dishes, spread onto toast, or folded into desserts. The idea that it belongs in a serious conversation about muscle protection after 65 might seem unexpected. But ricotta earns its place on this list because of one critical fact. It is one of the richest naturally occurring sources of whey protein that most people can find in any ordinary grocery store. Here is the background. Ricotta is produced from the whey that drains off during the making of harder cheeses. That whey is dense with fast-absorbing proteins, the same protein fraction found in the premium powders marketed to athletes for post-workout muscle recovery. Why does absorption speed matter so much after 65? The answer involves a process called anabolic resistance. It is well established in sports medicine and gerontology that muscle tissue becomes progressively less responsive to protein signals as we age. The same 20 grams of protein that triggers robust muscle repair in a 35-year-old produces a significantly weaker response in a 70-year-old. Overcoming this resistance requires not just more total protein, but the right kind. Protein that absorbs quickly enough to create the sharp amino acid spike that aging muscle still needs to respond. Whey is one of the few proteins that can reliably deliver this. A recent clinical review examining over 800 adults aged 65 and older found that fast-absorbing dairy proteins were significantly more effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis in this age group compared to equivalent amounts of slower-digesting protein sources, including most plant-based options. The advantage was most pronounced in participants over 70, where anabolic resistance was most advanced. A 3/4 cup serving of whole milk ricotta delivers approximately 14 grams of protein and between 1.3 and 1.5 grams of leucine, the specific amino acid that acts as the molecular trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Research consistently identifies a leucine threshold of around 2.5 grams per meal as the minimum required to meaningfully stimulate muscle repair in adults over 65. A 3/4 cup of ricotta brings you close to that threshold. Add 2 eggs and you cross it comfortably. The ideal use is as a morning protein source, eaten within the first 60 to 90 minutes of waking. After a full overnight fast, amino acid availability in the bloodstream is at its lowest point of the entire day. Fast-absorbing whey protein from ricotta is the most direct way to reverse that deficit quickly. Stir it into scrambled eggs, blend it into a morning smoothie, or eat it simply with a handful of walnuts and some berries. The preparation takes under 3 minutes, and the protein delivery is immediate. Number 4. Parmesan, the highest leucine density of any common food. If you had to identify a single food that delivers more muscle-protecting leucine per ounce than anything else most seniors eat regularly, the answer would probably surprise you. It is not chicken breast. It is not Greek yogurt. It is not a protein shake. It is aged Parmigiano Reggiano. 1 ounce of properly aged Parmesan contains approximately 10 grams of complete protein and between 1.7 and 1.9 grams of leucine, the highest leucine density of any commonly available whole food. And the reason it is so effective goes deeper than the raw numbers. During the aging process, Parmigiano Reggiano is legally required to age a minimum of 12 months, with premium varieties aged 24 or 36 months. The cheese's natural enzymes break down protein chains through a process called proteolysis. By the time the cheese reaches your plate, a significant portion of the protein has already been partially pre-digested into smaller peptides and free amino acids, including free leucine. This means the leucine in aged Parmesan absorbs faster and more completely than the leucine in fresher cheeses or younger dairy products. It is, in effect, partially pre-prepared for the body to use. A large-scale study published in a leading European nutrition journal, tracking over 1,200 adults aged 60 to 80 across a 12-month period, found that protein bioavailability, the actual proportion of consumed protein the body can absorb and deploy, was a stronger independent predictor of muscle mass maintenance than total protein intake alone. Seniors who consumed highly bioavailable protein sources retained measurably more lean muscle throughout the study, even when their total caloric intake was identical to the lower bioavailability group. And 3 ounces of aged Parmesan distributed across the day delivers between 5 and 5.5 grams of leucine. Experts increasingly recommend a daily leucine target of 4 to 5 grams for adults over 65 actively working to prevent or reverse sarcopenia. 3 ounces of Parmesan can get you there through food alone, without a single supplement. Practically, 1 ounce grated into morning eggs, 1 ounce stirred into a lunchtime soup or salad, 1 ounce shaved over roasted vegetables at dinner. Each portion feels incidental. The cumulative effect across a week is substantial. Take Walter, a 68-year-old retired postal worker from Ohio. Walter was not inactive. He walked 3 miles every morning. But at 2 consecutive annual checkups, his doctor flagged declining grip strength, a reliable early indicator of broader muscle loss across the whole body. When Walter logged his diet carefully, he discovered he was averaging just 46 grams of protein per day on a diet dominated by bread, pasta, fruit, and coffee. He had never thought much about protein at all. His adjustment was deliberately minimal. 1 ounce of aged Parmesan folded into his morning eggs. 1 ounce crumbled into his afternoon soup, That single shift added 20 grams of highly bioavailable protein to his daily intake without changing anything else he ate. At his 6-month follow-up, his grip strength had improved measurably for the first time in 3 years. His doctor, who had been preparing to prescribe a protein supplement, called the change unexpectedly significant. Number 3. Aged Gouda, the vitamin K2 and muscle connection. Most doctors never discuss. You have likely heard of vitamin K. To most people associated with blood clotting and bone health, primarily through K1, the form found in leafy green vegetables. But there is a second form, vitamin K2, that is almost entirely absent from clinical conversations about senior muscle health, despite accumulating research that suggests it plays a direct and measurable role. K2 is found almost exclusively in fermented foods and full-fat dairy from ruminant animals. Its function is distinct from K1 in one critical way. K2 activates a protein called osteocalcin, which is responsible for directing calcium toward the tissues where it is actually needed: bones, teeth, and skeletal muscle. Without adequate K2, calcium supplementation can result in calcium depositing in arterial walls and soft tissue rather than reaching the muscles and bones it was intended to support. But for muscle function specifically, the mechanism is direct. Every skeletal muscle contraction requires calcium at the cellular level. K2-activated osteocalcin optimizes calcium availability within muscle tissue. Research also indicates that K2 has independent effects on insulin sensitivity in muscle cells, influencing how effectively muscle tissue takes up glucose during physical activity, a factor with real consequences for endurance and functional strength. A clinical study involving over 1,500 adults aged 60 and older found that those with the highest circulating levels of vitamin K2 scored significantly higher on every measure of physical function: grip strength, walking speed, and chair stand performance, compared to those with low K2 levels. Crucially, this association held after researchers controlled for total calcium intake, vitamin D, and overall dietary quality. The conclusion: K2's independent contribution to muscle function had been substantially undervalued in geriatric nutritional guidance. Aged Gouda, particularly varieties aged 18 months or longer, is among the most concentrated dietary sources of menaquinone 7, MK7, the most bioavailable and longest-acting form of K2. Aged Gruyere, long-aged Manchego, and aged Edam also contribute meaningfully. But Gouda consistently ranks at the top of tested varieties. One point that cannot be overstated: K2 is fat-soluble. It requires dietary fat for absorption. This is a central reason why full-fat dairy consistently outperforms reduced-fat dairy in studies measuring musculoskeletal outcomes. The fat in aged Gouda is not a problem to manage. It is the delivery mechanism without which the K2 cannot reach the bloodstream at all. Choosing reduced-fat aged cheese does not lower risk. It disables the very mechanism being discussed. Eleanor, a 72-year-old retired librarian from Vermont, had been faithfully taking calcium supplements for 4 years following an osteoporosis diagnosis. Despite consistent compliance, her functional leg strength continued to decline, and her fall risk score had risen at 2 consecutive annual assessments. Her integrative medicine doctor ordered a vitamin K2 panel, a test Eleanor had never been offered in 4 years of active calcium management. Her levels were critically deficient. Over the 6 months that followed, so Eleanor added aged Gouda and other K2-rich foods to her daily meals alongside her existing supplementation routine. At her next annual assessment, her fall risk score had dropped, and her lower body strength testing showed meaningful improvement for the first time. Her doctor's chart note read, "The calcium supplementation appears to be performing as intended for the first time." If this research is new to you, subscribe to Senior Health Decoded right now. Every single week, we publish videos exactly like this one. Research grounded, designed specifically for adults over 60, and built around information that actually changes how you manage your health. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what's coming next. Number 2. Cottage cheese, the overnight muscle rescue. There is a metabolic window most seniors do not know exists. It opens around midnight. It closes near sunrise. During those 8 hours, while you sleep and have no awareness of any of it, your muscles are making a decision: repair and rebuild, or break down and scavenge. After 65, the overnight fast becomes a period of accelerating muscle protein breakdown. With no dietary amino acids arriving after dinner, the body begins drawing from skeletal muscle to supply the essential building blocks needed for overnight cellular maintenance. This is not a design flaw, it is an aging reality. And for years, nutritional science treated it as an unavoidable feature of getting older. Then research on pre-sleep protein changed everything. A 2012 study published in Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, conducted by researchers at Maastricht University Medical Center, demonstrated that consuming casein protein approximately 30 minutes before sleep significantly increased overnight muscle protein synthesis and improved whole-body protein balance. Subsequent research extended this finding specifically to older adults, and the results were striking. The pre-sleep protein benefit was even more pronounced after age 65, when overnight muscle breakdown is more aggressive, and the opportunity to counteract it through slow-releasing amino acids is more consequential than at any younger age. Cottage cheese is the most practical and accessible whole food casein source available to most seniors. Unlike whey, which absorbs within 60 to 90 minutes, casein forms a slow gel in the stomach and releases amino acids steadily over 5 to 7 hours. A 1-cup serving of full-fat cottage cheese, consumed 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, provides a continuous supply of amino acids throughout the night, effectively counteracting the catabolic breakdown that would otherwise accelerate in the absence of dietary protein. 1 cup of full-fat cottage cheese delivers approximately 25 grams of protein, including 2.3 to 2.5 grams of leucine, bringing you to or near the leucine threshold required to sustain muscle protein synthesis even during rest. A large-scale clinical review involving over 900 adults, aged 60 and older, found that those who consumed a slow-release protein source within 2 hours of sleep retained significantly more lean muscle mass across a 6-month tracking period than those who did not, even when both groups consumed the same total daily protein across waking hours. The timing, the researchers concluded, mattered as much as the quantity. The recommendation from the research is specific: 1 cup of full-fat cottage cheese, not low-fat, for the same fat solubility reasons discussed in the Gouda section, 30 to 60 minutes before sleep, a minimum of 4 nights per week. A tablespoon of natural nut butter, a small handful of walnuts, or a 1/4 cup of blueberries integrates seamlessly without altering the protein profile. This single habit, a small bowl of cottage cheese before bed, may be the most accessible, highest leverage nutritional adjustment available to seniors who are serious about protecting their muscle mass while they sleep. Number 1. Full-fat cheddar, the CL. A revelation that changes everything. Here is the number 1 item on this list. It is the most counterintuitive finding in this entire video, and it directly challenges more than 30 years of dietary advice handed to seniors. Full-fat cheddar, the cheese most associated with restriction, most likely to appear on a mental avoid list for adults managing their health after 65, contains one of the most potent, naturally occurring anti-catabolic compounds identified in modern nutritional science. A compound that directly intervenes in the process by which aging muscles break down, and most seniors have never heard it mentioned once. That compound is conjugated linoleic acid. CLA. CLA is a naturally occurring fatty acid found almost exclusively in the meat and full-fat dairy products of ruminant animals, cows, sheep, and goats. In full-fat cheddar, particularly from pasture-raised or grass-fed herds, CLA concentrations are among the highest of any commonly consumed food. And what CLA does to aging muscle tissue is quietly extraordinary. Muscle catabolism, the active breakdown of muscle protein, is not simply the consequence of being sedentary after 65. It is an accelerating metabolic process driven by chronic low-grade inflammation, age-related hormonal shifts, and changing metabolic priorities. Muscle is being dismantled at a faster rate than healthy aging biology should allow. This is why seniors can walk daily, stay active, and still lose meaningful lean mass year over year. The breakdown side of the equation has been outpacing the building side, and most nutritional strategies only address building, while leaving breakdown completely unaddressed. CLA works on the breakdown side. The research consistently shows that CLA suppresses the specific enzyme pathways responsible for muscle protein catabolism, reducing the rate at which muscle tissue is broken down for energy. This mechanism is fundamentally different from the leucine and whey approach described earlier in this video. Leucine stimulates muscle construction. CLA reduces muscle demolition. Both sides of the equation matter equally after 65, and most senior nutrition plans address only one of them. A large-scale human study involving over 1,000 adults between the ages of 60 and 80 found that those in the highest quartile of dietary CLA intake lost, on average, 37% less lean muscle mass over a 3-year tracking period compared to those in the lowest quartile, independent of total protein consumption, physical activity level, and overall caloric intake. When you consider that sarcopenia is largely driven by slow accumulation over years rather than dramatic sudden losses, a 37% reduction in the rate of muscle loss represents an enormous real-world difference in functional strength, independence, and quality of life across a decade. A separate randomized clinical investigation in adults over 70 found that consistent dietary CLA intake over a 12-week period was associated with improvements in both lean body mass and chair stand performance. The effects were most pronounced in participants who combined dietary CLA with light resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. The researchers described the interaction as synergistic. Resistance exercise stimulates muscle protein synthesis. CLA suppresses the competing breakdown process, and the net result is accelerated preservation of lean mass that neither strategy achieves as effectively alone. Full-fat cheddar aged 6 months or longer delivers approximately 500 to 700 milligrams of CLA per 1.5-ounce serving. Research on CLA and muscle preservation in older adults points to a meaningful daily target of between 1.5 and 3 grams. 3 ounces of aged full-fat cheddar distributed across the day, roughly 1 to 1.5 ounces at lunch, another 1 to 1.5 ounces at another meal, contributes significantly toward that target through food alone, without any supplementation. One variable matters enormously here: the source of the dairy. Dairy from grass-fed or pasture-raised cows contains 2 to 3 times the CLA concentration of dairy from conventionally grain-fed animals. This is not a wellness marketing claim. It is a documented difference in fatty acid composition that directly determines how much of the anti-catabolic compound you are actually consuming. Look for grass-fed or pasture-raised on the label when choosing cheddar specifically for this purpose. Ruth is 71 years old. She spent 35 years as a secondary school art teacher in the Pacific Northwest, and she had remained genuinely active through her late 60s, weekend hikes, tending a large garden, cycling occasionally. She was not someone who had become sedentary. But in early 2023, her doctor ordered a body composition scan after 2 years of subtle but consistent functional decline, and the results were sobering. Ruth had lost nearly 8 pounds of lean muscle tissue in 3 years. Alongside this, her bone density had dropped below the threshold that prompted her doctor to use the word concerning. When Ruth reviewed her diet with a nutritionist specializing in senior health, the pattern became clear immediately. She had been eating what she considered an exemplary diet, largely plant-forward, low in saturated fat, generous in vegetables and fruit. She had eliminated full-fat dairy completely 10 years earlier after a conversation about cholesterol with a previous doctor. Her dietary CLA was effectively 0. Her leucine intake was low. Her pre-sleep protein was non-existent. Over the 8 months that followed, Ruth reintroduced full-fat dairy systematically, aged cheddar at lunch and as an afternoon snack, cottage cheese before sleep 4 nights a week, Parmesan folded into her midday meals. She made no other significant dietary or lifestyle changes. Her exercise routine remained the same. At her 8-month body composition follow-up, Ruth's doctor reviewed the scan results twice before speaking. The muscle loss had not only stopped, Ruth had gained a net 2.7 pounds of lean mass. Her grip strength had improved measurably. Her hiking endurance had returned to where it had been 2 years earlier. Her bone density marker had stabilized for the first time in 4 years. Her doctor changed his blanket recommendation on full-fat dairy for seniors managing muscle loss. Not for every patient. Individual factors always apply. But for those in Ruth's situation, the evidence had become too clear to set aside. Of course, everyone's health situation is different. Individual factors, including sodium sensitivity, kidney function, or cardiovascular history, and existing cholesterol management, all affect which cheeses and what quantities are appropriate for you specifically. Always discuss significant dietary changes with your healthcare provider before making them. Action steps. Here is exactly what to do this week. Step 1. This week, buy 4 cheeses. Full-fat cottage cheese, a wedge of aged Parmesan, a wedge of aged Gouda, look for one aged 12 months or longer if possible, and a block of aged full-fat cheddar labeled grass-fed or pasture-raised if available. These 4 cheeses together cover every muscle protective mechanism discussed in this video. Fast-acting whey protein, leucine bioavailability, vitamin K2, casein overnight repair, and CLA anti-catabolism. Step 2. Redistribute your protein across the day. Stop concentrating most of it at dinner, one of the most common patterns among seniors, and one that wastes protein's potential. Aim for a minimum of 25 to 30 grams at breakfast, another 25 at lunch, and a protein-containing snack before sleep. Use these cheeses to fill the gaps you may not have realized existed. Step 3. Start the pre-sleep cottage cheese habit tonight. 1 cup of full-fat cottage cheese, 30 to 60 minutes before you go to sleep. Add walnuts, a spoonful of natural nut butter, or a small handful of blueberries if you prefer. Commit to this at least 4 nights per week for the next 30 days, and take note of any change in how you feel in the mornings and during physical activity. Step 4. When shopping for cheddar, specifically seek out grass-fed or pasture-raised on the label. The CLA concentration difference between grass-fed and conventional dairy is 2 to 3 times. This one detail meaningfully changes how much of the most important anti-catabolic compound you are actually consuming each day. Step 5. At your next appointment, ask your doctor to check your vitamin K2 levels. This test is not included in a standard panel, and many seniors have never had it done, even after years of active calcium supplementation. Ask also for an honest assessment of your total daily protein intake. Many adults over 65 who believe they eat well are consuming less than half the protein their muscles require, and most do not know it until someone actually checks. Before you go, tell us in the comments, which of these 5 cheeses were you already eating, and which finding surprised you most? And if you know someone over 65 who has been advised to cut back on full-fat dairy, please share this video with them. What the research now shows, and what many seniors have been told, are 2 very different things. And that difference has real consequences for muscle health, independence, and quality of life.